Hello and happy Thursday. Thank you all for joining the Alumni Society today for the latest installment of our Microlearning series. Our goal with this series is to provide actionable advice and insights from members for members. So if you would like to be a featured guest on this webinar and share your wisdom on a certain topic, please email members@thealumnisociety.com with your ideas. I'm Christina Merrill, Member and Community Engagement and Communications Manager at the Alumni Society and a proud graduate of Columbia. Today, I'm happy to welcome Ana Sheila Victorino, co-founder of the wellness and coaching company Bask Being. Welcome, Ana Sheila.
Thank you, Christina. I'm so happy to be doing this with y'all.
It's great to have you with us today. Let's dive right in. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do today.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Mexico City. I grew up in Chicago and Southern California mostly. I graduated of Stanford University and business school at UCLA. I started my career in technology as a product manager, and that's where I spent a significant portion of my career. But a health issue actually, I had to be still for the first time in my whole life. And that obviously, helped me reflect on a lot of things in my life. And I started to transition into other areas that I had wanted to explore ever since I was little. And so what that led me to was founding a workplace wellness company, Bask Being. And what that also led me to do is I'm also the co-host of a podcast called Tamarindo, which really is at the intersection of advocacy and also self-care and self-development. So I bring a lot of the wellness and self-development topics that I focus on with my workplace wellness company also to the podcast. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. So yeah, we're very excited to hear from you today and tap into your expertise. The topic is burnout. Let's take a moment to, and burnout is one of those words that can certainly sort of like get thrown around a lot. It's certainly a big buzzword at the moment. Let's take a moment to define the word burnout. What is burnout?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's really important to start there. So burnout is chronic workplace stress that has been unsuccessfully managed. And so the key words here are workplace. So when we're talking about burnout, we're talking about chronic workplace stress. And then the other part is unsuccessfully managed, right? Because one thing I want to mention is that stress itself is not bad, right? But when it starts to be harmful is when it's chronic and there is no relief from the stress. And that's the chronic and not actually being able to manage the stress is what leads to burnout and some very real consequences.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you. That's certainly a great way of putting it. And so, burnout can be misconstrued, as a short-term problem, but its consequences, of course, are anything but. What harm can burnout do in the long term, both to an individual and to an organization, would you say?
Yeah. So, some burnout can have some really devastating consequences, both individually and collectively. Individually, it can cause, conflate, or contribute to most health conditions. So we're talking sleep problems, digestion, unwanted health, weight gain or weight loss, to as serious as strokes and heart disease. So some really devastating consequences burnout can contribute to or conflate to. And then at our organizational level, as you can imagine, when folks are having real health problems as a result of burnout, you're seeing lower productivity, you're seeing more mistakes, you're seeing attrition, you're seeing an effect to company morale that can have really significant consequences to business success and longevity as well, right? If you don't have employees that are well or feel well, you're going to feel that. Even it might not happen right away, but it can have some really long-term serious consequences at an organizational level as well. Yeah,
for sure. And what would you say are some of the signs of burnout?
Yeah, so signs of burnout include just feeling exhausted or having no energy all the time. So have lack of energy, reduced efficacy at work. So if you start to, let's say you're having a harder time just doing smaller tasks that used to, take you 10 minutes, now they're taking an hour. If you're having struggling sending emails, things like that, when you start to see that efficacy and you're like, you feel like you're doing things as you normally would, but things are just getting harder, then that's a sign that you could be already burned out or on the brink of burnout. And then also if you're starting to feel like a distance towards your job, maybe you used to feel really excited and maybe you're like, well, we're still doing really amazing work, but I'm starting to feel a little bit more negative or more cynical about the work, then that's another sign that you could be on the brink of burnout as well. Yeah.
Excellent. And how would you say, how does burnout look at different stages of one's career? Is there a difference between burnout when you're mid-career versus when you're more established? Does it have anything to do, would you say, with the length of your time at an organization? How would you address? What would you say?
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. So what we've seen is that the longer that you're at a particular company, the more likely that you are to burn out. And we surveyed over 700 employees at a company, and we found that. And what we attributed to is that these folks are usually have a greater source of knowledge, they're mentors. So there's already a lot of pressure that they're carrying. So when more folks depend on you, that can also lead to higher rates of stress. And another thing that we saw is that actually the amount of hours that you spend in meetings can also make you twice. So if you spend 4 or more hours a day in meetings, you're twice as likely. And again, this is a survey of over 700 employees, twice as likely to burn out. And so, a lot of folks that are older, more seasoned, whether you're at a company for a long time or just in a more senior position, you often do spend more times in meetings, right? Because you're mentoring, you have direct reports, things like that. So that the amount of hours that you spend makes you twice as likely to burn out. So that's I think another reason why the longer that you're at our company or more seasoned, you're actually can have a higher rate of burnout. And you also often have many more responsibilities outside of the home that then also contribute, that come into your workday as well, right? And I think the other thing I really want to point out is that the older that we get, the more that we cannot afford not to pay attention to burnout. Right? Because as I shared, some of the consequences from burnout can be really devastating. Strokes, heart disease, these are some really serious consequences. And when we get older, we can't bounce back from, things. We don't bounce back as easily. And so we cannot afford as we get older, especially, to not pay attention to these signs of burnout, right? So if you're starting to notice some physical consequences, so if you're starting to get sick more often, right, that's also a sign that if you're starting to get more colds, like that's a sign that you're probably burnt out or on the brink of burning out, right? And so I would say, especially as you get older, it's even more critical to start to pay attention to those signs.
I love that. I love that insight. Thank you. And then on that note, how would you say managers can help prevent burnout in their employees?
Yeah, so this is huge, right? Because as individuals, I can tell you, these are all the things that you can do to manage your stress, to prevent burnout. But there's only so much that as individuals we can do, right? In order to really change and reduce burnout in organizations, it has to be not just an individual effort, it has to be a cultural effort, or there's only something that so much that individuals can do, right? And so as a manager, the first part is really awareness. So really practicing, just having a pulse of the health of your teams is really important, like from a physical and emotional perspective. If your employees are missing more days, if you're seeing them looking just like a little more raggedy, right? If you're noticing a difference in the quality and efficacy of their work, it could be that they're burned out. I mean, they could be wanting to, work hard and deliver high quality work, but they could be at the point where they literally cannot because their bodies cannot. So it's really practicing paying attention to the health of and well-being of your employees, number one. Number two is as a manager, you're contributing to culture. You're helping drive culture, right? So you have to foster a safe culture so that folks don't get to these levels, because a lot of times when you're feeling burned out, you've been battling through chronic stress for a while, and maybe you felt like you couldn't take care of yourself. Most folks, if you're reaching a burnout level, you haven't felt like you could take care of yourself up until that point. Right? And that's a problem. If you didn't feel like, if it had to get there before you could take care of yourself, then you haven't felt safe enough to share with your manager or to take care of yourself before that. Or maybe, but another thing is sometimes you don't notice because we're so on autopilot. So it's also starting to pay attention, right? So it is on the individual to start noticing what's going on. But the second, as a manager, is to not have a culture that doesn't foster that, right? So I want to use the example of boundaries, because it's an easy one. So if you as an individual have set your boundaries that you're closing your computer at 6 p.m. or whatever time it feels healthy for you, you need to feel like it's okay to do that, right? Because if you feel like that's what you need, but other folks are, sending emails or continuing to do work after that, then you feel like, even though that's the best for you, you feel like you can't do that, right? Because other folks are sending emails and continuing to do work. So they're going to be rewarded for overworking, right? So as a manager, you have to help uphold help people feel safe enough to hold those boundaries, right? And how are you showing folks that you're not rewarding folks that aren't taking care of themselves, right? So that's what I would say. And then lastly is managers get to work with their, the heads up of their organization, so that well-being is also prioritized in a strategic way, not just like a check the box, like, oh yeah, we have this quarterly workshop that we do, but it needs to be a cultural priority and done in a strategic way. So I'll say that. I can keep going, but I'll stop.
I love that bit about boundaries though. And like, show your employees that you're not rewarding the people who are overworking. It's okay to sign off at a certain time and get back to your personal life. So all great points. Love them all. Thank you. And why would you say it's so important to help employees combat burnout, both individually and collectively?
Yeah, so I think I've shared sort of touched on that already, but because, it has some really meaningful and devastating consequences, both for the long-term health of individuals and organizations. There was a McKinsey Health Institute survey that found that if we tackled burnout and workplace wellness from a more systematic approach, we could add 6 years of higher quality life per person. So, and focusing on higher quality life, right? Because that's really what matters. And as we know from an organizational level, when an organization starts to get sick, right? Because it's not just the individual is getting sick, that sickness can also spread to a culture, to an organization, right? If an organization starts to get sick, or turning things around can be, very expensive. If you start, it's easier to keep an employee than to hire a new employee, right? So so those are some things I would say.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. And then what would you say are some resources to unravel and prevent burnout?
Yeah, so I'll start. So at Bask Being, the company that I founded, we use a framework called the 3 R's of stress management. And I think that's a really good way to think about how we can unravel and prevent burnout. The 3 R's stand for recognize, relieve, and reduce. So we have to do, the first step really is getting ourselves out of autopilot, right? So recognizing what's going on in our body, what's going on in our mind, so that we can be aware of when we're starting to, get close to burning out, or when we're in a state of chronic stress. So practicing mindfulness is a way to start to unravel and prevent burnout. So whether it's on your own, just starting to pay more attention, doing meditations throughout the day, using meditation apps is a way to kind of start to practice mindfulness and start to recognize. Then there's relieving, right? So relieving stress in the moment. So we might not be able to change our situation completely, right? Again, because it needs to happen to really, combat burnout. It needs to happen at an individual and a collective level. But what we can do is do things that help relieve stress in the moment. It won't solve it, but it can at least help you in that moment. And that can also delay the amount of time that it takes to burn out. So you can have less frequent burnouts by the things that you start to do to help relieve stress in the moment. So, so different things that you can do to calm your nervous system in the moment, which we can get into a little bit later. R is for reduction. So what changes can you make in your life that actually remove some of the things that are keeping you in a state of chronic stress, this is really the harder work of like sort of taking, weeds out by the roots to really change our environment. But that takes a lot more work. It takes support. It takes, organizational care as well. So that's kind of the bigger piece, but that's how I would frame it.
Fantastic. I love it. And then what are some stress management tools that you recommend to combat burnout?
Yeah, so kind of getting into I touched about the relief part. So we talk about our breath, body, and brain. So the breath, body, and brain is how our nervous system communicates with us, right? So we can use our breath, body, and brain to, in as little as a few seconds, change how we feel, right? And so our breath, for example, doing breath work, slowing down your breaths, doing belly breath. And there's all types of, if you look up breath work, you can see there's all types of different types of things that you can do with your breath, which is crazy, right? Because we breathe all the time, but we actually take for granted the power of playing with our breath as a way to calm ourselves, to actually also bring us energy if we need more energy. So the breath is a really powerful tool. So there's very simple exercises that you can do, even just slowing down your breath. So you don't need to go to a breathwork class. You can literally just be in your office when you're experiencing a lot of stress, just slowing down. We can even do it right now, right? If you're feeling nervous, you can just take a deep breath, inhale in through your belly, fill up your lungs, hold, and then release out your mouth. And even just taking a few breaths like that, I feel calmer already from just that. So knowing that you don't need to go to a class, there are very easy tools you can use. And of course, there's bigger things you can do, right? But there's things you can do in the moment like that that'll help. It's not going to solve it, but it'll relieve, right? So your body's another stress management tool, right? So movement. And again, it can be as easy as, let's say you're at your desk and you just need a little bit more energy, or you're stressed, just like doing like jumping, like, just going like this, like jumping jacks, but seated, just going like that. If you need energy, that can feel good, or going on walks. And of course, we know like actual exercise, like longer, whether it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30, whatever time you have, just knowing that the body is a really amazing tool for stress relief, and releases some powerful happy chemicals, right? So, but you don't need to, if you don't have time to go to the gym for an hour, you don't need to. There's very short things you can do to move your body and help with stress relief and stress management. And the last one is your brain, right? So breath, body, brain. So calming the stress, calming the stress that's going on in our head is the way that we can use our brain, right? So if you're getting into an anxious spiral, whatever kind of spiral you're going into, we can do different things. So you can journal. So anytime that you put what's in here down onto the paper, there's a release that happens, right? It's not just here. You can process things better when you look at them on a page sometimes. Practicing gratitude, and I know that's cheesy, and I'm not trying to promote toxic positivity, but it can be really helpful. Like, let's say you're in a tough moment, to just literally identify 5 things that you're feeling grateful for, and either saying them out loud, writing them down. And if you're struggling with, sometimes, we're in a really hard place and we're like, oh, I don't have anything to be grateful for. Like, what is the thing that made you smile today? Like, even if maybe it's your coffee, right? Maybe it's a flower that you saw. So they can be very simple things, even if you're hard time, really getting yourself to find things, and you'll notice that there's actually really positive effect that you can feel that can calm you down. And the last thing I'll say, using your brain, so actually looking around, like, let's say whatever room you're in, and you're feeling a lot of stress, just pointing out things that are facts. So for example, the door is white, the curtains are green, there's a cup on my table. So it sounds silly, but especially if you're feeling a lot of stress, just saying things that are actually true, because most of the times we're telling ourselves stories. And most of those stories are not true. And our brain is just trying to keep us safe. And so us identifying things that are actually true can also help with stress relief and stress management. So those are just a few tips. And these are things, like I said, you don't need to go. Of course, you can go do a workout class. Of course, you can go to pay for an app. But there's some things you can do without just your breath, body, and brain, and not need to spend any money.
I love it. And
sometimes that's what we need. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I love how you mentioned coffee and flowers as little things that to be grateful for. Those are literally 2 of the things that I'm the most grateful for: coffee and bouquets of flowers in my home. So, but I love it. It's wonderful. And then on that note, how can we cultivate healthier and more sustainable organizations that don't foster burnout culture?
I mean, I think the big thing is that well-being needs to be at the center of, how you design culture. Right? It needs to not just be a check mark, because if it's just a check mark, it's like, oh yeah, we have these benefits that we offer, but they're not an integrated part of your strategy, your overall strategy, then I think that's a miss, because well-being has such a direct impact on on organizational success, right? So it needs to be integrated, it needs to be thought out, it needs to be measured, and it needs to be adapted based on what its impact is for folks and their well-being and how they're doing in an organization. So I mean, I think having policies that uphold sustainability, right, and not just speak to it, right? And how are you assessing what you're doing currently? So being able to identify, like, say, you know what, yeah, like be accountable and be, it's okay to identify areas of improvement, right? So I really love, there's a Surgeon General framework for mental health and well-being that was released somewhat recently, and it focuses on 5 essentials for workplace mental health and well-being, and I have them listed here, and I think that's actually really good. I really recommend that resource. So the Surgeon General framework for mental health and well-being, I think it's a really great framework to look at in designing wellness strategy and designing strategy overall for culture strategy. So it's protection from harm, connection and community, work-life harmony, mattering at work, so belonging, and opportunities for growth. And so those are the 5 essentials for workplace mental health and well-being that the Surgeon General framework has identified. So I think those are really, I really love that framework. So I would recommend folks check that out as well.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. And we have, so those are our questions for now. We do have one question from the audience, folks. If you have more questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But we did get one, I did get one question directly messaged to me, Ana Sheila. I've started to see a trend where there's almost a backlash to the concept of self-care. Can you dispel some negative stereotypes about self-care?
Yeah, I think that some of the backlash that we're experiencing, I think it's like when any, you know, word starts to get used so much that I think I think sometimes people can take advantage of these words and start to, you know, anyone, like, how do I explain it? I mean, I think that I think people are starting to sell a lot of things around self-care, and so I think there's like is it, how authentic is the way that we're using it, and what are we using it to promote and sell, right? It's like whenever something that is important starts to get used so much, you start to see different ways that people are using the words and services that necessarily isn't done with the best intention, right? So that's what I would say. But I think that, like, self-care is always important. It's always something to be prioritized. But we get to be careful around how folks are using it, and I think something that you did really well is like, what does it actually mean, right? So like, let's define how we're using words, especially when they start to become buzzwords like this, right?
Amazing, amazing, great. Well, that was the only question that we received. Ana Sheila, thank you again so much for being here today and sharing your insight. I'm sure everyone on this webinar found this session as valuable as I did. Tell us, how can members reach you?
So you can reach me on baskandbeing.com. So we offer workshops, we offer individual and group coaching, we offer you know, wellness assessment. So we do like a wellness scorecard, and we have a team of data scientists and healthcare professionals. And then we also help design wellness strategy. So we do that, and you can check us out at baskandbeing.com/contact if you'd like to explore a way that we can work with you or your organization. And then you can also find me on tamarindopodcast.com. That's my podcast. We're on break right now, so you can catch up on all of our episodes. So taking some time to take care of ourselves and re-energize before the fall. And you can also follow me on Instagram if you'd like. I share some musings there, and my name is like LA _ Ana Sheila, the way that my name is spelled. So you can also find me on Instagram as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing your insights today. So thank you so much for spending some time with us. Folks, please remember, if you are interested in sharing your wisdom for an upcoming microlearning series webinar, send an email to members@thealumnisociety.com. Thank you all again for joining us today, and have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, thank you all. I appreciate y'all. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Ana Sheila. Bye.
Hasta luego.